Shadow Warrior 3 is a good game, but it is a game that let me down massively. Now, Shadow Warrior isn't a franchise I've been invested in for a long time or whatever. In fact, I only really started playing it as of last year. The second game was available on Game Pass, so I gave it a go, and I ended up really enjoying it. So find out there was a sequel that was out in a few months had me really excited, and then the game got delayed, so I was a little bit disappointed, but I was still pretty hyped. And then I brought the third one-day release, and I booted it up, and I wasn't on it for very long because I had a major headache and could not play it, so I only really did part of the first level. But then, the day after, I finally got the opportunity to properly play the game, and I live streamed it, and I'll be honest, I didn't really enjoy it anywhere near as much as I thought I would. I streamed a portion of the game and played the rest off camera. Well, sort of, obviously I had to record footage for the sake of this video, but I wasn't recording or streaming my reaction to the game. So in today's video, I want to give my thoughts on Shadow Warrior 3, talk about what I think it does well, but also talk about what really let me down, and that will be the main focus today. So how's it going, Magpies? I'm Magpie Leon, and let's jump straight in. Before I talk about the stuff that majorly disappointed me, I want to quickly go over the things that I think the game did well. First of all, I thought its story was a major step up over Shadow Warrior 2. Everything felt more connected and flowed a bit nicely. It didn't feel connected to the prior games as much, more so to Shadow Warrior 1. It felt like Shadow Warrior 2 was almost completely ignored, which disappointed me at first, but I don't mind it entirely. I also think the characters and the character interactions were really fun. Because there was less characters overall, it meant they could be developed more, and I think this was a good choice. There is some characters from prior games that I've missed, and the fact that they weren't there was, again, a little disappointing, but I could get past that because overall the story and the characters that were there were really enjoyable. Lo Wang has a different voice actor this time around, which when I first heard it, I thought maybe it would hinder my experience, but it did not, because the guy that plays him in this game does a great job. I don't think he delivers the cheesy humour as well as the guy that voiced him in the other games. However, he really plays the character really, really well, so I did not have an issue with it. And by the time I finished the game, he was Lo Wang. I completely just felt like he was. I'm going to try my best to not spoil anything, but I am going to put a spoiler warning on now. I won't really be talking about the story in depth, so whether or not you want to experience the game for yourself, maybe click off, but I'm going to try my best to avoid talking about story spoilers. But the spoiler warning is there just in case. I think the game's gameplay is also really good. I do have my issues, but I'll get into that in a minute. I think the gameplay was pretty solid. Everything flowed quite nicely. I think the executions that you can perform on enemies were cool, and I like how they were integrated into the gameplay. The fact that some of them gave you special weapons. I mean, I think majority, except the basic enemy, was the only one that didn't give you one. But I think this was a great choice and something that, again, I'm glad was included. I also thought the environments looked really nice. Some of the areas that you go to are quite the visual treat. Other than that, there is like little things that I probably enjoyed, but those are the major positives. Now, as I said, I enjoyed the game's gameplay, but I feel like there was a lot of missed opportunities. First of all, it's clear that this game is heavily inspired by Doom Eternal. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think Doom Eternal is a phenomenal game, and it got me through a good portion of lockdown, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I wasn't after a new Doom game, I was after a new Shadow Warrior game. Don't take that as me saying that I felt like the game was completely copying Doom, because I don't think that was the case. Some of these elements were already there in Shadow Warrior 1, but it did feel much more inspired by Doom Eternal rather than a continuation of Shadow Warrior 2. And that's what sort of let me down. Instead of the more open level design that we had in the second game, we had more of a linear experience. Not that a linear experience is bad, again, but it's not what I wanted. Some of you might have enjoyed a linear game more than the open level design of Shadow Warrior 2, and that's completely fine, but the point of the video today is to talk about why I was disappointed in the game. You would have a platform segment, then you'd be in an arena for a combat encounter, then you'd have a platforming segment, and a lot of the time it could feel a bit repetitive. But the gameplay was enjoyable enough where it wasn't that much of an issue. The game, of course, has a grappling hook, but I just feel like it didn't do enough with it. Now, for example, Halo Infinite, you can use the grappling hook on pretty much everything, and I guess maybe Halo Infinite's grappling hook has sort of spoiled me a little bit because I love how it functions in that game. So I guess I should compare it more to Doom Eternals. Doom Eternals allows you to grapple onto pretty much any enemy, and then in the DLC they introduced the hook shot, or whatever it was called, into some platforming segments. The grapple hook in Shadow Warrior is basically just used for platforming segments. It is present in some combat arenas, but I feel like using it slows down the momentum of the gameplay. You sort of do this back and forth swing animation, so no matter where you swing from, it always feels like you swing back rather than just sort of rushing through, and it feels like it slows the pace of everything down. You can grapple onto like 2 of the many enemies in the game, which was kind of disappointing. I feel like some enemies would be much less annoying if I had the option to grapple onto them, like the flying ones. If I could grapple onto them and perform some kind of sword combo, that would be awesome, but something like that isn't present. You can also grapple the little explosive barrels, but it doesn't pull them towards you that much, it sort of nudges them slightly. Again, these aren't necessarily complaints, but it feels like a missed opportunity, and I wish they did more with the grappling hook. One of the major parts of the gameplay was the executions, which were obviously inspired by Doom, but they do something very unique with them, which is why I said they were one of the good things earlier on. I love how you get the special weapons and stuff, and I haven't got any complaints about that aspect. Sometimes the animations feel like they are drawn on for a bit too long, which again feels like it slows down the momentum. In Doom Eternal, everything flows really nicely and seamlessly, whereas Shadow Warrior, it does feel like doing some of these executions or using the grappling hook slows things down to a halt. The level design I thought looked really nice, but there was some bits where it was quite annoying, especially in some of the combat areas. There was like just too many points where I felt like I could have fell off, or just portions where I'd get stuck, unable to move, because there's just that many enemies around me. It was kind of hard to concentrate on what was going on, which I guess is sort of why I missed the more open level design of the second game. Overall, I think the gameplay is pretty solid. It just feels like it missed a few major opportunities, and some aspects of the level design could be a little annoying. Now, of course, a big part of the gameplay is the weapons available, and there isn't loads here. Shadow Warrior 2 had a huge arsenal of weapons that it had some sort of RPG elements. You'd get loot from enemies, and that isn't present in the third game. It feels much more like Doom Eternal in the sense that you sort of just get the weapons through bits of the story. You find them while you're exploring through the levels. And this is fine, but I feel like it sort of damaged the diversity a little bit. Don't get me wrong, it meant each weapon was definitely useful in its own way and definitely played a role in the sandbox, and that's great, but I kind of miss the large arsenal of the second game. Having so much choice of weapons made it feel a bit more fun for me, so the fact that that wasn't really an option was a little disappointing. I wish there was just a few other weapons that you could unlock that you could choose between instead of necessarily just being stuck to that one. The upgrades were also much more simplistic. I will address that Shadow Warrior 2's upgrade system is confusing as hell, but I also had a lot of fun with it, and I think once you've played the game long enough, you realise what the upgrade system is and how each thing works, and I think it has a really fun and unique upgrade system, whereas Shadow Warrior 3 goes for a much more linear progression with its upgrades. You find orbs, which are then just used to pick the next upgrade on the upgrade tree. This isn't just for weapons, this is also for your character. Overall, it was fine, it just didn't feel as engaging, it didn't feel like I had much control over it, which was a little disappointing. There's also no side quests and not really much exploration at all present in the game. Even Doom Eternal had a good bit of exploration, but none of that feels present in Shadow Warrior 3, which sort of makes me not want to go back to it. Maybe if there's a new game plus I'll play through it again, but the fact that there is no sort of side missions or extra content things to go back for right now, it doesn't mean that I think it warrants a second playthrough. For you, that might be different. If you enjoyed the game enough, you're going to want to play through it again. I just wish the game had more to offer. Shadow Warrior 2's story is short, but it has so much more to offer outside of its story, with a plethora of side quests and other objectives, and then of course there's New Game Plus to go and do whatever you missed, and that's great. But none of these things that made Shadow Warrior 2 great in my opinion were present in the third game. My main issue for Shadow Warrior 3 stems from the fact that it feels like it's trying too hard to be Doom Eternal and not hard enough to be Shadow Warrior. It does a lot of things really well, and again, I will say that I think it is a good game, but I think Shadow Warrior 2 is a great game. You might enjoy Shadow Warrior 3 more than me, which is completely fine. You might think that a lot of the things that I have issues with are actually things that make the game special to you, and that's okay. People might not like what I like about Shadow Warrior 2, and again, that's fine. I just wanted to sit down and talk about my issues with Shadow Warrior 3 and things that I was disappointed in. I think there's some untapped potential there, and hopefully, if we get a fourth game with some story DLC, some of that is tapped into and we get some really cool stuff. I really missed the open level design and the sort of RPG elements that the second game had. I'm not mad that they're not there, but I just wish they were. Shadow Warrior 3 is a good game, and I reckon if you're after some kind of Doom type shooter game, give it a go. It doesn't feel like a Doom clone or rip-off. It still feels unique enough to warrant playing it, but it is clearly heavily inspired by Doom Eternal. Anyway, I think that's basically everything I've got to say today. If you enjoyed Shadow Warrior 3, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what your favourite Shadow Warrior game is. I know I haven't mentioned Shadow Warrior 1 that much, and that's because I haven't played that much of it. I've played enough to know that Shadow Warrior 3 is much more like Shadow Warrior 1 over 2, so I guess in a way it could be seen as a return to form, but I feel like Shadow Warrior 2 sort of grew on the first game and made a lot of improvements, and Shadow Warrior 3 almost feels like a step back. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new here. I'm aiming for 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and if this video is out during March, I'm hoping for 800 by the end of March. Cheers for watching, folks, and I'll catch you all in the next one.